The kingdom's Royal Magic Academy was a place of wonder, a towering institution built upon centuries of mystical knowledge, powerful sorcery, and, unfortunately, a mountain of bureaucratic paperwork. No one knew this better than Edric, the Academy's clumsiest and least remarkable intern. His job was simple: deliver scrolls, fetch enchanted ink, and most importantly, stay out of trouble. Trouble, however, seemed to be drawn to him like a cursed magnet. On an otherwise normal afternoon, Edric was given a stack of dusty, ancient contracts to deliver to the headmaster's office. These weren't just any contracts. These were magical pacts, sealed by the highest order of wizards, binding powerful sorcerers to their sworn duties. Among them, hidden between treaties and spell research agreements, lay a single parchment edged in blackened gold. Its ink shimmered ominously. Edric, of course, did not notice. With a huff, he set the stack down in the archives, reaching for his quill to sign off on the delivery sheet. But a sudden gust of magical wind, likely from one of the unstable scrolls, sent the papers flying. In his frantic attempt to gather them, Edric made a mistake. He grabbed the blackened gold parchment and, without reading a single word, scrawled his signature onto the designated line. The room fell silent. The torches flickered. The walls trembled. A deep, eerie hum filled the air, followed by a whoosh as dark magic exploded from the contract. Edric barely had time to blink before the entire academy shook with the force of the spell. Outside, the sky darkened. Thunder cracked. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled. A warning bell, signaling the rise of a new Dark Lord. A dark, heavy cloak materialized around Edric's shoulders. A spiked obsidian crown appeared on his head. The floor beneath him cracked and shifted, revealing an ominous swirling portal, pulling him downward into the unknown. The last thing he saw before vanishing into darkness was the horrified face of the headmaster bursting through the door, screaming words that would haunt him forever. "What have you done?" The swirling darkness spat Edric out with the grace of a catapult. He tumbled across cold, polished stone, landing in an undignified heap. As he groaned, trying to untangle himself from his newly acquired cloak, he noticed a massive obsidian throne looming before him. The throne room was grander than anything he had ever seen. Black marble floors stretched beneath flickering torches that burned with eerie green flames. Jagged pillars lined the hall, etched with runes that pulsed like beating hearts. At the far end, massive iron doors stood shut, their surface covered in claw marks, as if something had tried and failed to break in or out. And then there were the minions. A horde of creatures stood in perfect formation, staring at him. Some were enormous, armored warlords with glowing red eyes. Others were skeletal sorcerers, their fingers crackling with necrotic energy. In the front row, a goblin with a clipboard adjusted his glasses, looking both unimpressed and severely overworked. For a long, uncomfortable moment, silence reigned. Then, as one, the entire room dropped to their knees. "Hail, Dark Lord Edric, Master of Shadows, Bringer of Doom, and Supreme Ruler of the Abyss." Edric blinked, then blinked again. Surely this was a joke. For a long, uncomfortable moment, silence reigned. The goblin with the clipboard cleared his throat and stepped forward, eyes scanning a parchment. "Ah, your darkness. It seems the contract has officially bound you to the title of Dark Lord. Congratulations on your ascension. Now, before we proceed with the traditional blood sacrifice, do you prefer goats or wayward adventurers?" Edric opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His brain had short-circuited somewhere between blood sacrifice and goats. The goblin continued. "Of course, as the new Lord of the Abyss, you'll need to review our financial reports, finalize war campaign strategies, and approve any dungeon renovations. The Skeleton Division has been requesting lumbar support for their thrones, and the Werewolf Army wants a dental plan. Oh, and the heroes have already scheduled their weekly siege on the fortress." Edric took a shaky step backward. No. This couldn't be happening. He was an intern. He fetched coffee. He wrote reports. He wasn't a Dark Lord. He didn't even know how to summon things, let alone rule an entire fortress of monsters. But as he reached for his head, he felt the cool, jagged edges of the dark crown resting there. His fingers trembled. The weight of responsibility, literally and figuratively, pressed down on his skull. This was real. He was the Dark Lord now. And unless he found a way out of this mess, he was going to be stuck managing an army of demons, monsters, and office grievances for the foreseeable future. A deep, ominous chuckle rumbled through the throne room. Edric turned sharply, only to realize, to his horror, that it had come from his own mouth. The contract's magic was working. He wasn't just trapped in the position. He was becoming the Dark Lord. Edric woke up the next morning to the sound of battle horns and screaming. For one blissful moment, he thought he was back in his dingy intern dorm at the Royal Magic Academy, listening to his roommate snore like an enchanted war horn. But then he cracked his eyes open and remembered he was in a fortress of doom. And there were sieges scheduled. With a groan, he rolled out of bed, only to realize that his bed was now an ominous floating slab of obsidian, surrounded by eerie purple mist. The floor beneath him was polished black stone, cool against his bare feet. His new evil robes, which had been left on a nearby chair, shimmered unnaturally in the dim candlelight, embroidered with eldritch symbols that pulsed whenever he looked at them too hard. Before he could process any of that, the goblin with the clipboard, who he had learned was named Sneed, burst through the door. "Your darkness, the siege has begun. As per tradition, the heroes will be storming the gates any minute now. Would you like to deal with them personally, or should we use the automated trap system? We just installed a new floor spike feature that has excellent reviews from last week's adventurers." Edric groaned, rubbing his temples. "I'm sorry, what?" "Wait. No talking." That ominous chuckle had slipped out of him yesterday, and he had no idea what else the contract's magic would force him to say. If he accidentally started monologuing, he'd never stop. Sneed continued flipping through his clipboard. "We've also received a formal challenge letter from the hero in charge. It's signed in golden ink, which is just obnoxious. I suggest we respond with an army of undead ravens, or maybe a really passive-aggressive curse." Edric felt his stomach drop. He had no idea how to handle a siege. He barely knew how to brew tea, let alone command an evil army. But as he opened his mouth to protest, the dark magic in his veins betrayed him. He found himself standing taller, shoulders straightening, voice deepening unnaturally. "Let them come," his own mouth declared in a dramatic, doom-laden tone. "The halls of darkness shall be their tomb." Sneed's ears perked up. "Oh, that's a good one. Should I get that engraved on a plaque?" Edric shoved a hand over his mouth before he could spew any more accidental villainous poetry. He needed to get out of this. But first, he needed to survive the morning. The attack began at exactly 10 o'clock sharp, because apparently, heroes were annoyingly punctual. Edric found himself standing on the fortress balcony, overlooking the battlefield below. Rows of adventurers gleamed in golden armor, their banners fluttering in the wind. Wizards chanted spells, archers knocked arrows, paladins in shining plate mail were doing aggressive lunges, getting ready to storm the gates. And in front of them, all stood the leader, a ridiculously handsome, disgustingly heroic knight with perfect hair, a perfectly chiseled jawline, and a sword that glowed so brightly it probably had its own personality. Sneed squinted at the approaching horde. "Looks like Sir Cedric the Radiant again. Didn't we defeat him last week?" A nearby skeleton warrior rattled in agreement. "Yeah," Sneed grumbled. "He keeps respawning. Heroes get way too many second chances. It's infuriating." Edric, meanwhile, was busy panicking. This was exactly the type of guy who would storm the fortress, slay the Dark Lord, and take all the credit. He couldn't let that happen. Not before he figured out how to quit. Before he could come up with a plan, Sir Cedric dramatically unsheathed his sword and pointed it toward the fortress. "Oh, great and terrible Dark Lord," he bellowed. "I have come to end your reign of evil. Prepare to face justice." Edric barely had time to process what was happening before the dark magic kicked in again. His lips curled into a smirk. His cape billowed ominously, even though there was no wind. And his own voice, deep, smooth, dripping with villainous flair, betrayed him. "Foolish knight," he found himself saying. "You dare challenge me? Then step forth and let despair claim you." The adventurers visibly recoiled. Even Cedric hesitated. Sneed whistled, impressed. "Dang, that was menacing. I didn't know you had it in you." Edric did not have it in him. The contract had it in him. Unfortunately, Cedric quickly recovered, because heroes were annoyingly persistent. He charged toward the gates, his army following. Edric panicked. "Sneed!" he hissed, desperately trying to suppress another villainous monologue. "Do we have, a diplomatic option?" Sneed looked at him like he had grown an extra head. "Dark Lords don't negotiate, your darkness." "Okay, but..." Too late. The battle had begun. The air filled with spells and arrows. The fortress's defense system activated. Lava pits opened. Skeletons charged. Giant spiders descended from the towers. Because of course there were giant spiders. And then, from the enemy's side, something terrible happened. Sir Cedric's army began pulling out baskets. Inside those baskets? Cookies. "Wait!" Edric blurted, his voice slipping into normal intern panic mode. "Are they bribing my army with snacks?" Sneed squinted. "Huh, bold strategy." To Edric's absolute horror, it worked. The werewolves stopped mid-lunge, sniffing the air. The goblins hesitated, eyeing the baked goods. Even the skeleton warriors looked tempted, which was ridiculous because they didn't have stomachs. One by one, monsters began defecting. The fortress's elite ogre guard? Gone, accepting brownies from a bard. The fire wraiths? Now sitting cross-legged, politely enjoying buttered scones. Even Sneed seemed conflicted. "Okay, but those lemon bars look really good." Edric wanted to scream. He was losing a battle to baked goods. Edric could only watch in horror as his once loyal army defected, lured away by the siren song of freshly baked pastries. The werewolves were now peacefully munching on blueberry muffins. The ogres had switched allegiances for a stack of cinnamon rolls. Even the undead seemed to have accepted their fate, enjoying ghostly cups of tea with the enemy. The worst part: the heroic adventurers were passing out seconds. Sneed was visibly struggling. His tiny goblin hands twitched as he stared at a basket of perfectly golden snickerdoodles being offered to him by a cheerful cleric. "Your darkness," he said, voice shaking. "I just want you to know. I have served you loyally. I have believed in our dark cause, but..." Edric gasped. Sneed took a cookie. Betrayal. Utter, soul-crushing betrayal. Sneed took one bite. His ears perked up, his pupils dilated, and he made a small, delighted noise that shattered Edric's heart. And just like that, the last loyal minion was gone. Edric turned back to the battlefield, clutching the edge of the fortress balcony. His entire army had defected. His defenses had crumbled. And now Sir Cedric was making his way toward the gates, smugly victorious. This was it. This was the end. Edric refused to go down like this. Not to Sir Cedric. Not to a horde of treacherous, snack-obsessed minions. And certainly not to a basket of oatmeal raisin cookies. The contract had forced him into this nightmare. The contract had made him the Dark Lord, and there had to be a way out. "Think, Edric, think." He scrambled back into the fortress, tearing through his ominous, candlelit study, frantically flipping through the cursed scrolls piled on his desk. Somewhere in this doom-ridden paperwork, there had to be a loophole. Pages rustled. Dust swirled. The magic-infused ink glowed ominously. And then, he found it. A single clause, buried deep within the contract. The title of Dark Lord is binding until officially passed on through a signed agreement with a willing successor. A successor. He needed to trick someone else into taking his place. A plan formed. Sir Cedric and his adventurers finally breached the throne room minutes later. Edric was waiting for them. His robes billowed ominously. His throne room flickered with eerie purple fire. He looked every bit the powerful, malevolent Dark Lord. Sir Cedric strode forward, sword raised. "It's over, fiend!" And then, before Cedric could strike, Edric raised a scroll. "Wait!" he said dramatically. "Before you defeat me, I have one final challenge." Sir Cedric, being a ridiculously noble idiot, hesitated. "What challenge?" Edric grinned and threw the contract at him. The scroll unfurled in midair, landing neatly in Cedric's hands. The golden ink shimmered. The enchanted clauses pulsed with dark power. Edric pointed at the bottom. "Sign here, and you claim victory. The Dark Lord will be vanquished forever." Sir Cedric blinked. "Wait, really?" "Of course," Edric said, casually shrugging. "Dark Lords are notorious for their honor. We always keep our word." Cedric narrowed his eyes. "This seems suspicious." Edric forced a neutral expression. "Suspicious? Number completely fair? Absolutely." Behind Cedric, his adventuring party whispered among themselves. One of them, a wizard in starry robes, tilted his head. "I mean," the wizard muttered, "technically, if he signs it, that does mean the Dark Lord would be gone forever." Sir Cedric pondered this. He was a hero after all. He loved signing dramatic declarations, and that's how Edric tricked the greatest hero in the kingdom into becoming the next Dark Lord. The moment the ink dried, the fortress shook, the torches dimmed, and Cedric's golden armor turned jet black. His shining sword warped, twisting into a jagged nightmare blade. His heroic cape transformed into a swirling, shadowy cloak. And the contract? It vanished in a puff of cursed smoke. Cedric froze. His adventuring party stared. Sneed dropped his cookie. Edric, meanwhile, felt the magic leave him. His Dark Lord robes disintegrated, replaced by the plain tunic and pants of a normal intern. He was free. Cedric, on the other hand, was not. The former hero let out a choked gasp, clutching his now ominous sword. His voice dropped into a deep, horrifying growl. "What? What have you done?" Edric backed away slowly. "Wow, would you look at the time?" he said, forcing a smug smile. "Gotta go. Have fun with the minions. You'll love them. Just keep plenty of snacks around." And with that, he ran. Out the throne room. Down the fortress steps. Past the still betrayed skeleton guards and cookie-filled werewolves. He ran all the way to the nearest village, where he collapsed into a chair at the local tavern. The bartender glanced at him. "Rough day?" Edric, now just an unpaid intern again, groaned. "You have no idea." But at least he was no longer the Dark Lord. Cedric could deal with that mess. And if the fortress ever needed new management, well, Edric would make sure to stay far, far away. Edric leaned back in his chair at the tavern, sipping a well-earned glass of whatever passed for juice in this medieval dump. He was finally free. No more cursed contracts, no more armies of minions demanding his attention, no more weekly battles with heroes trying to stab him. Across the kingdom, the former hero turned Dark Lord Cedric was probably screaming in horror as the fortress's ominous magical throne absorbed his soul, binding him to its will. Edric almost felt bad for him. Almost. He let out a relieved sigh, stretching his legs, when the tavern door slammed open. A hooded figure strode in, their presence making the air unnaturally cold. The chatter in the tavern died instantly. Every patron turned to watch as the figure approached the bar. The bartender, suddenly nervous, wiped his hands on a rag. What can I get you?" The hooded figure ignored him. They turned directly to Edric. "You!" the figure said in a voice dripping with dark energy. Edric's stomach dropped. The figure reached into their robes and pulled out a scroll. A very, very familiar cursed contract. Edric sputtered. "Number absolutely not. I am not signing another one of those." The hooded figure laughed. A horrible, deep, echoing laugh. The tavern's lanterns flickered, and shadows danced on the walls. "You misunderstand," the figure said. "This is not a contract for you to sign." Slowly, they unfurled the parchment. And that's when Edric saw it. At the bottom of the scroll, written in glowing, enchanted ink, was his own signature. The one from the very first contract he signed. The ink shifted, rearranging itself. A new clause appeared, written in sinister, curling script. Should the current Dark Lord willingly pass on their title, the original signee shall inherit their remaining debts. Edric's blood ran cold. "Debts?" he croaked. The hooded figure gave him a chilling smile. "The Dark Fortress's maintenance fees," they said. "The minions' wages. The siege equipment rentals. The magical spell upkeep. The cursed throne repairs. The expense reports for enchanted weapons. The kingdom's army destruction reimbursements. The—" "Stop," Edric begged. But the figure wasn't finished. "The former Dark Lord, meaning you, owes exactly 10 million gold pieces in unpaid expenses. And as per the contract," the scroll flared with eerie light. Edric felt a horrible, sinking weight settle on his shoulders. A magical chain appeared around his wrist, linking him to a floating ledger book that had the most soul-crushing title of all time. Kingdom's Official Debt Collection Bureau, Dark Lord Division. Edric stared at it. His freedom had lasted exactly 1 hour. The hooded figure leaned in, grinning. "Welcome back to the dark business, Edric." And with that, the lights in the tavern dimmed, as Edric's new nightmare began. The end, or is it?
If you like this video, then do subscribe to this channel.